Hello everyone, my name is Sameeksha. I am a final year BTech student at Ujjain Engineering College and a network and cloud trainee at Navyug. Today is 2nd May 2026 and today we're going to understand DNS. DNS stands for Domain Name System. As the name suggests, it is used to translate the domain names into IP addresses. For example, it converts www.google.com, which is a fully qualified domain name. Here, www is a subdomain, Google is a domain, .com is TLD, which stands for top level domain, and dot is a root, which is hidden. So it makes a fully qualified domain name as www.google.com, and to DNS, we convert this fully qualified domain name into an IP address. An IP address is very essential for the device's communication on a network. Devices need IP addresses to communicate with each other on a network. DNS is like a phone book of internet. Let's understand this with the help of a real life example. You have n number of friends and you cannot remember each one's phone number, but you always remember their names. So whenever you need to communicate with one of those, you just type their name and you can call them directly. This is how DNS works for networks. We cannot remember the IP addresses of each and every server, but we can remember the names because names are easier to remember by humans, but IP addresses are more difficult ones to be remembered. And for one or two websites, we can remember the IP addresses, but when the number increases, it is very difficult for us to remember the IP addresses of each and every server. Before DNS, users have to remember the IP addresses of every website they want to visit. For example, instead of typing the fully qualified domain names, we have to type the IP addresses to reach the website. Problems without DNS. First, hard to remember. Remembering the IP addresses is a very difficult task for us, but domain names are easier to remember. Second, not user-friendly. User prefers simple names like google.com, facebook.com instead of numeric values. Third, difficult server management. If any of a website changes its IP address, then each and every device who needs to communicate to that particular browser have to remember the new IP address and need to be updated, which is very tedious task. Fourth, no central name resolution. If DNS is not in a picture, there is no other resolution for resolving the domain names into IP, and this will gonna increase the difficulty for the users to remember the IP addresses. And to solve all these problems, we use DNS server. How DNS works? When we enter a website name into a browser, DNS resolves that domain name into IP addresses step by step. First, browser query. The user writes a domain name, for example, www.example.com. This is a fully qualified domain name on a browser. The browser asks what is the IP address for this domain name. Second, DNS resolver check. The local DNS resolver check whether the IP address is in DNS cache or not. If it is present in DNS cache, it returns the IP immediately. If not, it goes for a recursive lookup process. In a recursive lookup process, it goes from the top hierarchy to the lower one. So, on the hierarchy of DNS, the top server is a root server, second one is a top level domain, and the third one is an authoritative server. Authoritative server is the one which contains the actual mapping of domain name to IP addresses. Let's see how this recursive lookup process takes place. So whenever the resolver do not get the IP in the DNS cache, it goes to a root server asking for what is the IP address of www.example.com. The root server will see in it. If it gets it, it gives the IP address to the resolver. But if it does not get it, it says go to the top level domain. The example of top level domains tldr.com, .org, .den. Then the resolver goes to top level domain and asks, what is the IP address of example.com? If the top level domain have it, it returns the IP to the resolver, and if it doesn't, it suggests it to go to authoritative server to find the IP address. Then the resolver goes to authoritative server and asks what is the IP address of www.example.com, and then that authoritative server returns the IP address to the resolver, and then the resolver can connect to the correct browser and can communicate. Let's take a quick summary for this recursive look. First, the resolver will gonna check in a cache. If it finds it, it will return to the resolver. But if the IP address is not there, it will go to a root server, which is the topmost server in the hierarchy of DNS. Then it will go to TLD, which is top level domain. After that, it will go to authoritative server, and from there it will gonna get the IP address and return it to the resolve. DNS cache stores the IP addresses temporarily. Before the DNS cache expires, the DNS uses the stored IP address, and after the DNS cache expires, the DNS goes for a recursive lookup process. Important point, DNS uses port 53 of UDP for the normal DNS queries and port 53 of TCP for the large and zone transfers. Benefits of DNS: easy to remember, scalable, easy management, and faster. Conclusion: DNS is a core part of Internet which help us to communicate to the web servers by converting the fully qualified domain names into IP addresses. I hope this helped you understanding the concept of DNS. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again with another Tech Bite.